a very significant part of people's lives that they've been incarcerated. It's a very significant part of people's lives that they were doing the things that they were doing that put them in prison. And I think it's really important to be able to establish the kind of a situation and setting where you can discuss that and talk about it. It's part of healing. It's part of being able to move on. It's part of people being able to identify themselves as who they are, and to also give people or help people to see how far they've come from a very realistic point of view. If you don't acknowledge that people were using drugs, were in prison, then the fact that they've been able to live in a sober house without using for 6 months might not mean anything to somebody who owns their own home, but to somebody else who's been in that situation, it means the world. People have learned some really healthy things in prison. I think folks have learned how to manage some of their feelings and their emotions. I think that when they make that transition, people need to be worked with to figure out healthier ways of learning how to do that in the streets, in the community. And it's a very, very clear culture that has its own language, that has its own set of acceptable and unacceptable behaviors.
Prison is a community within its own self. Well, what you have to do is this, you have to do what you have to do to survive, which is, get in trouble or whatever you have to do. If you're all by yourself. But as far as society, a lot of people I see a lot of people get the same mentality within prison and come in society and act the way they act in prison, which is not accepted in society. I had to catch myself fall back into they call it jailhouse mentality. Fighting and cussing and doing stuff that's not, society ways, not humane.
When they gave me that bologna sandwich, I would eat it silently, and that was it. And that's what I learned about being in jail, how to be. The more you not look at anyone, not pay to anyone, just act like you're invisible. And that helped me to survive.
Prison, just saying, he said that there's a certain way, not that you have to act, but there's certain things you become like, you build defense mechanisms. Okay, some people try to go in there, keep them to themselves. That don't always work. So you got to be ready for any kind of incident or situation, especially dealing with officers. You got to know how to get around them, because every officer's not going to treat you like a human being. A lot of them are going to treat you like, you feel like it's no different than 1861, than 2003.
I'm not good at tough and violent, but it's amazing how that can rise up out of your soul just about instantly if you need to. Because if you come across as too nice and too sweet, people are going to have you, doing stuff like getting up and turning the channel for them on the TV. And that kind of stuff, it starts there. People are measuring you to see, how much of a flunky can they make out of you. And then it gradually, I think if you're there long enough, it starts escalating into, oh, let me have some of that. The problem I find is that it takes you, even though I was only there for 3 days, it takes you a couple of days to kind of turn that off. When you come out of the street, it's like once you've brought up the tiger, it's hard to tone it back down.
In jail, you gotta watch your back from so many different things. Got a lot of things going on in jail. A lot of things going on in jail. You know what I'm saying? For sex and drugs and gangs and what have you. Gotta be careful. You know what I'm saying? Once you been inside them doors, where you're told to do everything, when to get up, when to sleep, when to eat, when to what have you, it's a wake-up call to some of us.
And then there's also women that that do have sort of a hardened affect, and that can be from being in prison, or it can be from the lifestyle they were leading before, or both. And they've just found that serves them, it protects their families, and they may not be willing to let down that guard at any cost. So I think when you're working with women who are like that, it's important to recognize that it's really a survival mechanism for them, and they're not going to let go of it until they feel safe, and they may never let go of it. But I think as long as they keep coming and keep asking and keep working with you, that there's value in the work you're doing, whether or not they seem to, show appreciation.
And it's a regular apartment building. Each residence in this apartment, as you can see, there's 6, has a day to cook, where the counselor works with. For those that can't cook, the counselor is there on a daily basis with them, assisting them, teaching them how to cook. If it does not work out, it will not be for the lack of opportunity. You have the opportunity, we're willing to work with you, and you need to demonstrate your readiness or your commitment towards your change. We'll be there every step of the way. But what I've come to find is that majority of the guys that comes from the prison system, the state prison system, tend to do much better than the guys coming from the jail system and the court system. I think that the reason for that may simply be that, you have guys that's been incarcerated for a longer period of time who now realizes the need for change. You do have to be tough in prison, especially this population, mental illness that I work with, because they're preyed upon in those type of setting. However, they are taken care of more in there. It's more scary out here for them, where they have to fend for themselves, so to speak. You have to sort of learn how to communicate, how to assert yourself, how to advocate for oneself. Whereas in that system, there's very little of that. Things are there, and it becomes routine. You know what you have to do in a way. But most guys that have come here have been very, very comfortable. Again, as I said, we have only lost 2 over the last 2-3 years that were reincarcerated, and that was for reasons that we could not even prevent being addressed. There was a gentleman that was with us, and he had some difficulties in the area of socialization. He was interested in getting a girlfriend, so we did a role play one day with him, and I said, "You run into a girl. This is the young lady. Da da da. How do you deal with a situation like that?" And his statement to me was, "Well, he meets the girl. The first question he would ask is how much." That was his idea of socialization and how to meet the woman. And it was funny, but it was real to him. This was all he knew, was how much. He did not know how to interact, how to engage a young lady.
The other day, for a split second, I had this sick thought of, wishing that I was back in jail because I didn't have them responsibilities. You know what I mean? It was like an overwhelming feeling for a little bit, because in jail, I mean, you know what I'm saying, it's three meals a day, no bills, no nothing, there's rec and stuff like that. And that's why, you get an anxiety about going back out in the street. Because I knew if I didn't leave the Department of Corrections with a plan, I would end up using drugs again and either, ODing and dying or coming back with another case. And I didn't really want to do that. I was just like, you ever heard the saying, sick and tired? I was just like sick and tired of, I do well in a controlled environment, you know what I mean? So then when I came out, I had to get, reconditioned, you know what I'm saying?
In jail, it's simple, because majority of jails force you to program. It's mandatory for you to program. And you have nothing to do because you're locked up in jail, so you only have times on your hand. So what you do is go through all the programs and try to get your mind focused, on what you want to achieve when you do come home.
In Massachusetts, usually the Irish guys hang with the Irish guys, and the Italians hang with the Italians, and you got some people backing you up. But most of the time, if you mind your own business and just do your time, you're not bothered. A lot of the ones that really act tough are the young kids coming in at first, probably because they're more scared.
Because I'm a gang member by race. I'm Puerto Rican. I go in jail and you can't touch me. I got 50,000 people walking around with me. 'Cause you have to be tough. You have to, well, even if you're not, you have to show that kind of face that you're tough. That you, if you mess with me, I'm gonna fight. And when you come home, jail to me is like, I used to call it my second home, because everybody knows me.
The level of despair that people are in and the level of abuse that they're facing is something that I think people aren't really aware of, and people need to be willing to hear it and really take it seriously when people report back what's been going on inside.
I think in actual time I have about 29 years of prison in. Okay, so it's been like a significant part of my life, and not as much as the criminal activity but as a sense of belonging to a group of people. You know, in my introduction to the medical department in prison, I've had some very sour encounters. They tried to give me a hysterectomy at the age of 20.
Hire ex-offenders. Have folks volunteering in your agency who are able to, on a personal level and a professional level, relate to clients and what they've experienced. While prison is something we don't want people to forget, you need people to understand that culture.
It ain't like we got a counselor to guide us through the program. We guide ourselves through it. We get to speak to each other, say what's on our minds, cry if we're gonna cry, get mad if we wanna get mad, but we keep it on the group.
Don't put up barriers that don't allow people into your services, because then you end up with no clients, or you end up with clients that are functioning at a very high level, and there's a bunch of people out there that aren't getting served or aren't getting housed. People come in asking for housing, and we don't say you're not going to get housing until you get to such a level. We say we're going to get you housing now. What do we need to do to get you housing? So harm reduction allows us to work with people that often haven't been worked with before and that have been turned away. And it's really, I think, a paradigm shift for a lot of people. They have to think in a different way about drug users. And I think that that runs parallel to people that are coming out of prison too. You often think, here are people with histories of, that have been involved in illegal things in the past, and how are we going to house them, and how is this going to be safe? And harm reduction says you can do that by being real with people and giving them the support they need to make the behavioral changes to stay in housing.
People need to recover from being in prison the same way that they need to recover from war, and that they go through very serious post-traumatic stress syndrome when they come out of prison. The United Nations did a special study of the conditions inside women's prisons, and particularly around health care, about 2 years ago, and they found the conditions to meet the international standards of torture.
I'm a humble person. I never had a fight in my life. I never have used these in my life. When these people come out of jail, I just tell them that's the first thing you have to do. You just stay yourself, stay humble. You know what I mean? That toughness, you gotta leave it in jail. You can't bring it out with you.
Our prison society does not believe in rehabilitation, okay? So, but everything that we endeavor is motivated by rehabilitation. You rehabilitate your career. You go back to school and learn this, that, and you know what I'm saying? You rehabilitate after having certain sicknesses.
We're not trying to do that. We gave up on trying to rehabilitate people years and years and years ago, and somewhere, along the line we went over to straight punishment.